Ilena, you've been following what's been going on in beef prices. We've all moaned about the high cost. What is significant about what we got from the president, or is there still stuff to be known?
The biggest unknown, I think, is where the supplies are coming from. People are watching that really closely. I think the biggest bets are probably Australia, Brazil, Argentina. I think this move has been really interesting for the market because it's the latest in a series that Trump has tried to do. So he already tried to boost imports from Argentina, which for the first half of the year are about double what they were last year already. And soon the U.S. is expected to resume live cattle shipments from Mexico, also to ease supplies. And so I think a move of the scope from the president really goes to show just how stubborn that pricing has been, that further action is needed.
Okay, but when you think about it, if there's a cattle shortage, how much can tariff policy really help that? And realistically, what else can policymakers do to combat that?
Yeah, it's a really hard situation for the industry. So what we see right now are really short-term Band-Aid fixes in terms of imports. They're very much helping to fill the shortfall in demand, but the U.S. net produces most of its beef already on its own. So imports, even as they're rising to a record share is still sub 20%. And now we're in this really weird situation where U.S. ranchers are trying to rebuild the herd, but that takes a long time. So basically the calculus they're trying to do is, do I sell my animal for meat right now and get really high prices back, or do I wait to keep that animal for breeding later on? And it's been really hard to do that. And then when you see this type of move, the live cattle futures market plummeted today. So that's another move that's creating uncertainty for ranchers even more.
Well, we happen to have a rancher with us. We are delighted to have back with us. He joined us earlier in the week, Vance Howard. He's CEO and portfolio manager of Howard Capital Management. We know that, but in addition to managing money, he owns and operates the Bar C Ranch in Madisonville, Texas. They do specialize in registered longhorn cattle. We want to bring you into the conversation that we're having here. Vance, what do we need to understand about this business and what we're seeing in terms of policy out of the White House?
Well, they've kind of gotten themselves in a little bit of a pinch because, we do have a shortage of cattle right now. If you look at Tyson, they shut down 2 meat packing plants about 2 weeks ago, one in Illinois, one in Utah for lack of supply, meaning they don't have the cattle to deal with. And you've got 2 different kinds of cattle. You got
All right, a little bit of a freeze there. We'll see if we can get back to Vance. Ilena, I want to go back to you. You follow this sector. We talked about on the weekend with you about what Tyson has been doing because they just don't have the cattle, so they don't need the plants up and running.
Yeah, exactly. The meat packers have been in a situation for basically since the start of 2024 where they've been paying so much for cattle that they're losing money on every head that they process. And so they've gradually, Tyson, JBS, Cargill, they've all sort of pulled back capacity a little bit to try to ease that competition for supplies. To be sure, the companies are still profitable, but that's largely in their other segments like chicken. The beef business itself is losing money, and Tyson, having already closed plants this time around, reported earnings again that again missed the mark, cut their outlook, and they're right-sizing more.
Vance, I think we've reconnected with you. Maybe there was a cattle listening and a cow or something, and they got a little...
Maybe they put a tariff on me.
Exactly, maybe so. So continue with your thought in terms of understanding the broader cattle market, because it hasn't just been tariffs. There's been other things that have been impacting the supply.
Well, it has been. And when you look at the high cost of cattle right now, well, there's a lot of ranchers that want to sell it this high. So, building back up the supply over 90 days may be more of a challenge than what people realize. And what you're seeing with ground beef is different than what you're seeing with prime. Prime is at the fourth highest price it's ever been in history, which is, way up there. Now, ground beef has dropped down quite a bit. But then again, you got to look at the different kind of cattle. You got live cattle and you've got fully grown cattle. Live cattle is about a 400 to 800 pound calf or a steer. So it's a little bit cheaper. It's not a fully, a cow that's going to deliver the most amount of beef. But I think there's a lot of challenges here. And with the tariffs coming off, I think it benefits Canada, but I also think it can benefit us too, as far as dropping down some of these costs of, I own 2 restaurants too, and our cost of prime steaks are through the roof.
Okay, but over the long term, do those kind of downward price pressures continue from this tariff relief, or do we need to see more?
Well, I think you're gonna have to see more. I don't think 90 days is gonna put a dent in anything. And I mean, a cow's got to breed, it's got to deliver a calf, it's got to grow up to the point that it can be eaten. I mean, you can see my rug back there. We ate that guy. and so that's a cowhide back there. But it's going to take time to redo this. And again, with high prices of cattle, especially prime, you're seeing a lot of ranchers that are selling off. But hey, here's one thing, and Carol and I talked about this last week when I was in New York. We've got Elon Musk coming in with a semiconductor plant, which is buying up thousands of acres around Grimes County, in between College Station and Huntsville. We're in a rural part of Texas where there's a lot of ranchers. Well, as he buys these ranch lands up, that's driving up the cost of land, which is, a lot of ranchers are selling into that profit margin. So that's also going to increase the profit, the profitability factor of, is a cow profitable if your land's real expensive anymore? So there's a lot of different dynamics going on here.
So great for you guys who own the land, perhaps, but not necessarily great for we consumers.
That's exactly right. I've got a good friend of mine, a good business partner. He's getting bought out by Elon Musk right now. I think he might have signed the contract last week for that semiconductor plant going in Grimes County, and they paid him a premium price to where he said, I cannot not take it.
I just got to say, just one last question, Vance. It makes me think about, though, food production. Like when we're competing for things like data centers or what have you, or semiconductor plants. I mean, you got to have places to produce food, and increasingly we want to make sure we have production domestically, because if anything, COVID taught us supply chains can be impacted pretty quickly.
And not only that, Carol, is when you expand on that, it's incredibly dangerous for us not to control our food supply. That's not a good thing either. And by the way, when you import cattle from different countries, I know the FDA does their job, but they're eating what they're feeding them down there. And so who knows what that is. On our ranch, we raise grass-fed cattle with no preservatives, no additives, and we try to stay away from any type of chemicals because we're trying to eat healthy down here. But who knows what you're getting sometimes when you're getting some beef from overseas.
Ilena, last thought from you in terms of as you watch this market.
I think we're starting to see interesting cues on the demand side that Carol and I talked about recently. The July 4th period is peak demand grilling season, and we sort of started seeing consumers become a little bit more hesitant, not necessarily demand destruction, like they're still buying it, but they're saying we're not willing to keep buying more if it's at these prices. And, economics 101 curve, either demand will have to come down or the supply will have to come back up from a significant herd rebuild. And I think everyone's sort of watching to see which one will cave first.